some of you may not know me. I'm Chandler Krazak. I'm one of the men's directors here, and I get the opportunity to hang out with you guys and to speak with you. Just so you know, Chris is in Nevada speaking at a church in Arizona. They're the same place, right?
Yes.
Just kidding. That's California geography class for you, because I didn't take one. But yeah, sorry, he's in Arizona speaking. He spoke at GCU last night, and then he's speaking at a church there. I can't remember the name of it. But this morning, he wasn't just like, oh, camp was hard, I'm going to take the weekend off. He doesn't do that. He works hard. Also, quick note for you guys. I know that we said during the announcements, but there is an Ecuador meeting next week, and I need both your parents there. And if they can't, please talk to me. Don't run around like crazy and freak out. Just come talk to me afterwards. And the last thing is, I get the opportunity to speak to you guys again during our service called Reconnect, which me and Sean Brazil run. So if you want to come out and hang out with us tonight, we will be there, probably setting up some volleyball and playing that. It's pretty dark, but we just love to play anyways. So I'll be speaking there. We're starting a new series called You Have Heard It Said, talking about how Jesus redefined culture. Anyways, we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about dating. Because we're talking about love, sex, and dating. I know next to nothing about sex because I haven't had it and haven't been married yet. So I'll learn about that sooner or later. Love, I know a little bit about, but since I'm in the season of dating, I figured I would talk about that. I'm going to give you guys 4 things today, and it's going to be 4 things on how to date well. But I just want to preface, you're like, why should we listen to you? In most cases, I'm 3 or 4 years older than you, so again, to listen to me, and if you're a leader in here, I'm probably quite a bit younger than some of you, and so you're sitting here like, why should we listen to you about dating? And I want to give you this notion that it's not because I haven't figured out. It's not like I figured out the system by dating and I know exactly what I'm doing, so everyone come and listen to me because I know exactly what I'm talking about with dating. Rather, it's this position of, even what allows me to speak up here is I'm in this constant state of learning. And a little bit as what our life as Christians should be is we're sitting here and we're learning because we don't know how little we know yet. There's this quote that I love, and it's, education is the progressive understanding of our own ignorance. And that's what I feel like the Christian walk is too. Is that wisdom which God bestows upon us, which you're going to talk about in Proverbs, that's what this message is a little bit about. It's more about wisdom and how it's worked its way through every part of our life. And dating is in part with wisdom. It's this idea of knowing when to and when not to make the right decision and how to act and how we should act. And so this wisdom that is given by God is something that we search for and we discover. And what it does to us is it enlightens parts of our life that realize just how little we know. Because as people, we generally like to walk through life knowing a lot, or seeming like we know a lot. I remember I was at the zoo one time, and there was this little kid, and he was talking, and you see even little kids, because I think this is what happens to us, but I had to do this report on monkeys at the zoo, so I'm watching these monkeys, and it's this endangered species, and I'm writing down all this stuff, and taking notes on it. And there's this little field trip of kids that come up, and this little girl's like, I think this species is endangered. And the guy's like, no, idiot, if they were endangered, they wouldn't be in the zoo. And I was like, no, actually, and I was like, never mind, I'm just going to let that little kid be wrong for a couple of years. But I think this is what our life is like. Is we walk around like we've got it figured out, calling other people idiots, duh, when God's just sitting up there come on, how much do you really know? Even Solomon in all his wisdom, God's sitting there really, what do you know in comparison to what I have? And we're like these little kids at the zoo telling other people what's what when we really don't have it figured out. And so that's where I come to you, not as someone who's figured it out, but as someone who's inquisitive, just asking questions of those who are wiser to me, constantly looking towards God and saying, hey, how can I be better in my own dating relationship? Because I don't even have this close to figured out. I make mistakes not just monthly, not just weekly, but daily. I constantly am in a process of making mistakes and trying to learn from those mistakes. And so this is me saying I've either made mistakes or I've learned from people who have made those mistakes and taught me not to. And that is why I try and have the best dating relationship with Heather Hall. She's right over here. She's my fiance. We're getting married in June 29th. So a lot of stuff I'm talking about is going to be in regard to her and our relationship. But again, it's not because we've figured out, everyone, me and Heather know exactly what we're doing, listen to us, but it's a long time ago, we sat down and go, okay, so we don't know how to do this thing. Let's ask questions on how to do this the best. And that is going to be the recipe, and actually is the number one point, or not the number one, but the first point for how to date well, is understand that you need help. It's understand that you need help. I think there's this notion out there that dating is this thing that is, not dating, counseling is this thing that's for the weak. You know, like when someone's really in a bad position, that's when you have to go to counseling. It's like the people that are sitting in that psychiatric chair and they're like, so tell me about your childhood. And it's this, if you're weak-minded, if you can't figure out your own life, if you can't handle your own situations, then you go to counseling. But I'm going to challenge that and say that counseling is actually something for the strong people. Because it says, even right here in Proverbs, this book about wisdom, Solomon writing to his son saying, here's some tidbits about wisdom. He says, the way of a fool seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. It's that, like, I've gone to counseling for different things in my life, and it's not because I'm weak and I couldn't handle those, but it's rather out of strength and wanting to handle that the best. I said, let me go to someone who's outside of the situation, outside of the emotions of it, and can give me the best advice so I can make the clearest and best decision for this situation. And that's what advice, counselors, even your small group leaders who can act as counselors are for you. Counseling is not this thing that weak people who have their life in a mess go to, because here's the secret. All our lives are in a mess. But the people whose lives are less of a mess are those who constantly go to counseling for those who have wisdom and seek that out. And that's the same way with dating. Is that if you want to prove that you are a good boyfriend or a good girlfriend, you can't start out with this notion that I've got it figured out, and I'm going to show people that I'm great. The start to being a good boyfriend or the start to being a good girlfriend is saying, I don't know what I'm doing. Someone wiser than me, please teach me. God, help me, guide me. And so it's asking and listening that will make you better as a boyfriend or girlfriend. I've shared this story the last two services, and I want to share it with you guys, is the other day, actually, I'm going to read this verse first, sorry. In 13:10, it says, where there is strife, there is pride, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. Where there is strife, there is pride, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. Solomon's saying, I've witnessed something. That anytime there's a situation of tension and strife or hostility, I find pride there at the center of it. And I'm going to show you how this appeared in my life. Me and Heather and I, I'm sorry, didn't mean to, it's improper grammar. Heather and I we were unloading the trailer with Jared Tomasek the other day. And this camp trailer, for those of you who went to camp with us, it was a blast. And there was like all these bubble soccer balls, which are pretty heavy by themselves, and there's like archery tag, and it's just stocked full of all this stuff. And so it was going to rain, and we forgot to do this earlier in the week, so the three of us go and unload this trailer. We normally load this trailer with like 10 to 15 people, so unloading it with three is a burden, to say the least. And so it's kind of a burden. It was in the middle of my day when there was other stuff I wanted to do, so I'm already a little bit on edge, already a little bit frustrated. And we're going to unload this trailer as it's cold outside. And I'm pretty skinny, so I don't like being cold. And I wear a lot of clothes, and that's why I'm wearing a thermal, because it's cold outside. But it's cold, I'm tired, it's in the middle of my day, we're unloading this trailer, and there's only three of us, and so we're like working to unload this trailer, and we get to the 9 square, and we start loading it up. In the 9 square in our closet, we've used these things that blow up, like basically this giant mega arena. They're just giant metal inflatable blowers, like they fill things up with air. We use them to hold back this wall of 9 square PVC pipe. These aren't meant for that, and a lot of them are missing like little legs, so they kind of wobble a little bit, and it's just not the best device. You know, we probably should put something there that better straps it down, but we don't, because we're resourceful and smart. So we are like stacking this stuff in there, and we got the metal things like holding them, but what happens sometimes is while you're stacking them, they push the metal things back, and you have to get it to stay, and so it starts falling, and I see it start to like come out, and they start to like fall on top of each other. And so I have Heather come, and she's like unloading something. I say, just hold this right here so I can push the poles back into place. Well, the poles are starting to fall out faster than I can push them back into place, and so I'm trying to like shove them. But it's a lot of them, and they're thick, and so they're kind of heavy. And so I'm trying to push it, and I go, and I like give it all I got, and I push it, and then one comes and hits me on the head. And like most people when they get hit in the head with the object, I, with a little bit of what you would call lack of self-control, got upset, and then I threw the blower on the ground and then just started throwing the poles out because I realized they needed to be readjusted anyways. But I kind of just looked like this big dumb animal who was like upset and threw everything out. And so in a moment of anger, I'm just like mad at this thing and just want to get it done, and I'm already tired and I'm already exhausted and I'm cold, so I throw it all out and I'm just upset. And I look over at Heather and she's just like looking at me like what? We don't act like that, like. Not because I have to be perfect or proper etiquette, but that's just like as a Christian and as a male who wants to be a leader of other people, like I'm supposed to conduct myself with self-control and not get angry. And so it was just this lapse in self-control and upset. And so we come later into the office, and she's talking to me, and she's like, hey, earlier, like I didn't really appreciate, the way that you acted, and I just want you to be the best version of you and to act better in those settings and not get angry and upset. But this thing that Solomon talks about, where there is strife, there is pride, I started causing strife because of my own pride. Because when Heather told me that, what I told her was, yeah, but like I justified why I did it, which I kind of did with you guys. It was cold, I was upset, it was in the middle of my day, and so I'm like, I had a reason to be upset. But that still didn't give me a reason to act this way. And then I started getting upset with her because I didn't like the way she told me. In a moment of pride, instead of listening and saying, thank you for trying to make me a better person, I got defensive because my insecurities didn't like the fact that I was being told that I acted immaturely, knowing that I acted immaturely. And so I caused strife, and I told her that I didn't like the way she said that to me, and there was a little bit of tension that I knowingly caused because there was pride there. And this is what Solomon's talking about. He's saying, I've seen situations in which people get upset. I've seen their strife caused because of own pride. And when I learned, and am still learning, and again, this was Thursday, so I'm still in a process constantly of learning to lay down my own pride, to understand that I need help in this relationship, that I can't do this on my own. That I had to lay down my pride and say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have acted that way, and I shouldn't have corrected you. I didn't like feeling less than or like I made a mistake, and in my own pride, I wanted to seem perfect. And it was only once I had that laying down of pride and I listened to the advice of what seems not to be like hyper-spiritual or anything, but even through prayer and repentance and saying, God, like I'm sorry I acted that way, and I'm sorry that I couldn't treat Heather the best I wanted to. It's through that listening of advice or taking the advice of others who say you need to learn to apologize in situations where it seems like you really don't want to. And it's through taking that advice that I start to become better as a boyfriend or as a fiance now. And I have a better action and I lay down my pride, because where there is pride, there will be strife in your relationship. And if you want to keep carrying on strife in your relationship, then keep carrying on your pride. But if you want a successful and happy marriage, relationship, then God is saying the key here is to know that you need to lay down your pride. What's going to help you is asking and listening. That's what's going to lead you to a successful relationship. Asking and listening. Interrupting and correcting will not help you. But what will is listening, asking questions, seeing how you can be the best version of you. And again, experience does not determine success. Like, we don't go to again, with all her different songs, we can assume that Taylor Swift has had like 25 boyfriends, but we don't go to her for dating advice. We're not like, 25 boyfriends? You really got it figured out, Like, you go to the one person that's like, yeah, I've had one girlfriend for 3 years, and you're like, oh, tell me how it's still going. Like, how did you make that work? Because it's not impressive to us that someone can have a bunch of relationships. And if you've dated a whole bunch of people, you don't sit there like, yeah, you know what, I've got this figured out. And now that I'm going to date someone new, like I've dated before, I know how this works. No, it's you sit there and ask questions and say, I still know so little about this. Can you teach me how, to someone who's wiser than you, can you teach me how to date well? What can I do that I'm not doing right now in order to be a better boyfriend or girlfriend? So the first thing is understanding that you need help. Number 2 is setting clear expectations. How to date well is to set clear expectations. Set clear expectations. Expectations are a gift to your significant other that you can give them. What it is you're basically giving them an instruction manual every time you tell them, hey, this is an expectation I have. It's that this phrase, unsaid expectations go unmet. And so if you want someone to know how to best act around you and to respond to different things, you say, here is a list of expectations. And you give them a lot, not because you're like, I'm so demanding and you need to fulfill all these expectations, but it's almost, here is in-depth instructions on how I run and how I feel best loved so that you can show me love and so that you can respect me in the way that would make me operate the best. My brother and I, we are very different in a sense. He's an engineer and he's going to grad school, and so he's very detail-oriented and he'll read through things. And even this last Christmas, I got him this little drone, this like little mini drone on Amazon, and they're like super cool. They're $25 and they're really rad. And so I got him this present, and I think part of the present was actually more for me than it was for my brother because I really wanted to play with this. And so, like the respectful thing to do, like you buy someone like a bag of chips, and you're like, oh, we can share. You can have the first bite, but you're just waiting for them to eat the first bite so you can respectfully have one after. That's kind of like what I did with this drone, is I was like, you play with it first so that I can use it. Well, the difference between me and my brother my brother and I, is that he always reads the instructions, and I usually just start into something and start trying to figure it out. So I grab this plane, and I start like trying to drive it, but I keep crashing it into walls, and there's all these buttons on it. And I asked myself, why did they just put random buttons on this? Like, what's the point? Whereas my brother is over there while I'm playing with his little drone, he's reading the instructions. So then he gets the controller back, and he's flying it really nice, and he makes it do like a flip. And I was like, whoa, how'd you do that? But this is what expectations are like in a relationship. Because you can be like me, flying a plane and keep crashing it into walls and slowly figure it out. Or you can take the time necessary and be diligent and read the instructions, that manual that someone gives that's saying, hey, here's how I like to be treated in certain situations. You get a little window into their world, and then when other people start asking, hey, how is your relationship working like that? How do you make her so happy? How come she enjoys being around you so much? How come she feels so loved? It's because you've read the instruction manual. You said, I know how this works best. And that sounds very robotic to you guys. Like, you're probably thinking, what are they, a robot? No, but it's helping them feel loved well. Like when me and Heather are in a social setting, I know exactly how to act. And not because I'm like, I have to act right or Heather will be upset at me. It's not about that. It's in order for her to feel as the most loved that she can. I know there's certain things, I know who people to avoid if she doesn't want me to talk to them. She knows people that it frustrates me when she talks to them. And if you're sitting there like, that's controlling and that's weird, it's like, we're jealous people by nature. And if there's people that I don't like Heather talking to, if we have a good relationship and she doesn't talk to them, then who cares? Like, you can call me controlling, but our relationship's working out, so it doesn't bother me at all that I tell her to avoid certain people. And you guys know just as well as I do. There's certain people that make us uncomfortable with our significant other to talk to. And it's this notion, have you guys ever heard of the 5 love languages? If you don't know the 5 love languages, I recommend taking the test. But there's these 5 love languages, and it's basically how you feel most loved. It's quality time, gifts, words of affirmation, physical touch, and acts of service. With all of these different love languages, with Heather, I could, different days, try each individually one of these. I could try physical touch, I could try acts of service and serve her, I could get her a gift, I could spend quality time with her, I could do all these different things and try and figure out how she feels most loved. But what would be a lot easier than that is to ask her once how she feels most loved and then continually do that. And that's like what setting clear expectations does. It gives you that so you don't keep having to guess how they feel loved. It's like if you're trying to fill this tank of this love tank and it's filled with proverbial digging of like dirt and shoveling it into this thing, if Heather's number 1 love language is quality time, and quality time is like this bulldozer that I can use to fill this tank, if I'm over here constantly getting her gifts, what I'm doing is taking this shovel and trying to throw dirt into this big tank, when all the while there's a tractor sitting here that says quality time on it, and because I'm trying to figure out how she feels loved and trying to show her how to feel loved, I'm over here with like this shovel of gifts, and I'm like just throwing like dirt in there, and I'm like, why don't you feel loved? And she's like, I just want you to spend time with me. And I'm like, no, I can't spend time with you. I'm buying you gifts. Like I have things to do. And so it's this opportunity that you have that helps increase romance, that helps increase communication, that makes you a better a better partner to the person that you're dating. That you can figure out, hey, here's how you feel most loved. Well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to show you love in this way because I know this is how you feel most loved. Number 3, in how to date well, is set up guardrails. Set up guardrails. Turn over just, if you're in Proverbs, turn a little bit to the left to Proverbs 7. Proverbs 7, verse 6 says this. And remember, this is Solomon writing to his son, talking about things that he has witnessed, about things that he sees that could be better. And so he starts talking to his son about this and saying, avoid this or do this in order if you want to have wisdom in your life. At the window of my house, I looked down through the lattice. I saw among the simple, I noticed a young man, a youth who had no sense. He was going down the street near her corner, walking along in the direction of her house. At twilight, as the day was fading, as the dark of night set in. Then came out a woman to meet him, dressed like a prostitute with crafty intent. She is unruly, defiant, and her feet never stay at home. Now in the street, now in the square, at every corner she lurks. She took a hold of him and kissed him. With a brazen face she said, today I fulfilled my vows, and I have food for my fellowship offering at home. So I came out to meet you, and I looked for you, and I have found you. I have covered my bed with colored linens from Egypt. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh and aloes and cinnamon. Come, let's drink deeply of love till morning. Let's enjoy ourselves with love. My husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He took his purse filled with money and will not be home till full moon. With persuasive words, she led him astray. And I love how he's going to use what this looks like, a word picture right here in a second. He says, she seduced him with her smooth talk. At once he followed her like an ox going to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into a noose, till the arrow pierced his liver, like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing it will cost him his life. I love that he relates this to a deer stepping into a noose, because I think when we simplify what certain actions in our life, when we simplify them to word pictures like this, we realize how foolish it looks. Like if you ever watched Planet Earth, thank you. I keep forgetting. But if you ever watch Planet Earth and you see these different animals that are about to be hunted, you almost wish, like you find yourself yelling at that TV, like, run, no, go, get away, the predator's right there, like it's going to attack you. And I wonder if Solomon kind of is sitting there in the top of his castle and looking out this window, almost wishing he could yell at this young man, like, no, run, go the other direction. Can't you see that walking down this street corner is going to cost you your life? It's going to end you in a place that you don't want to be. And just like this young man walking in a street corner, when we fail to set up proper boundaries in our life, proper guardrails, we are walking into a noose. And as your leaders, your small group leaders and adults in your life who care about you, when they tell you to set up proper guardrails, it's because they see you about to walk into a noose. And it's not like they're wanting you to have no fun and be these stiff Christians who really love Jesus, because people who really love Jesus have no fun. But it's rather your small group leaders who really care about you and want you to have the best sex life and marriage and want you to have the best marriage are watching you as a deer about to walk into a noose, and it would be wrong of them if they didn't try at least talk into your life to keep you from walking into this noose. And so the other thing I love about this story is that Solomon doesn't give any credit to this man. Like, I think for a lot of us, we find ourselves in the shoes of this man, giving the excuse of, like, if you talk to him, he'd be like, I didn't know what happened. I just started walking down the street, and next thing I knew was, like, she kissed me and then brought me in and said all these things to me. And he could easily make a case for how this isn't his fault and how he just kind of got tricked into this and wasn't aware, but he was the one who decided to walk down that street. And there's this phrase that I love. It's your direction, not your intention, will determine your destination. It's one of my favorite phrases ever, but it's perfect for guardrails. Your direction, not your intention, will determine your destination. If you have the best intention of not crossing boundaries, but you are constantly headed in a direction that leads you to crossing boundaries, you can't keep asking when you arrive at your destination that you didn't want to be, what happened? Because it's turning the wrong corner, walking down the wrong street. We talked about this at camp. The mistake of this man wasn't going into the room with this prostitute, and we might see that as the mistake. His mistake started long before that, which was walking down the wrong street corner. And a lot of us, we keep walking down that wrong street corner going, when are things going to change? And God's like, when you choose a different street. And I think that's for my life, like when I see, I used to kind of try and trick myself so I would feel better. But I would say, like, I'm really trying to set up good guardrails. And in the words of the theologian Yoda, he says, do or do not, there is no try. For those of you who are sitting there, like, trying to set up good guardrails, stop trying and do or do not. There is no try. It's that, like, you get to, with your guardrails, when you keep making excuses for yourself, it's that setting you find yourself in where you're at their house, you're at your girlfriend's house, and her parents are there, but then for some reason they're really tired. They decide to go to bed at 8 p.m. And you're like, we had no idea they were going to go to bed at 8 p.m. And then next thing we knew, we just found ourselves in a place we didn't want to be. And that's where I, like, caring about you, say, that's not good enough. The mistake wasn't, oh no, we didn't know her parents were going to go to bed. The mistake wasn't, like, we didn't mean to lie down together. If you say, how can I ask you this question, how can you set up better guardrails next time? I don't expect your answer to be, well, we just can't lay down together, because that doesn't solve the problem. It's the setting that leads you to laying down together that's the problem. And you need to take the step before the step in order to set up good guardrails. It's to take that different street. If it's going to your significant other's house that caused you to stumble, then stop going over there. Even if it's a 90-10%. Like, even if you are good 90% of the time, it's not worth the other 10% not to like chance it. Just don't go over there. Don't put yourself in that setting. There's this question that has changed my life and changed my guardrails and kind of the way I do dating, and it's stop asking, is this okay, and start asking, is this glorifying to God? Too often I started asking myself, like, is this okay? Can we kiss? Can we make out? Like, is that actually wrong? Is that really bad? Is it, like, you're like, I know like hand jobs aren't good, oral's not good, like all this stuff, I can't do that, but what's the line? Like, how far can I go? And that is a question that's going to lead you to failure again. The question we should start asking is, how do I glorify God in this? Because that yields a totally different results. Because if I sit there and I say, is it okay for me to be in the car with Heather? Sure. But if I say, is it glorifying to God for me to be in the car with Heather? That is a totally different question. And if the answer is no, then I shouldn't ride in a car with her. But if the answer is yes, then I can ride in a car with her. And it'll change the way you do boundaries, and it'll give you the boundaries that you want to have. Because guardrails mean nothing if they aren't actually protecting you, if they aren't actually keeping you holy and helping you glorify God. Then what's the point of having guardrails? And that kind of brings me to my last point, which is asking yourself how you can glorify God brings you to the last point of how we can date well, and that's submit to God. Submit to God. I know this is like the really Christian answer is like, oh, if you want to date well, if you want to do anything well, submit to God. But there's a reason that statistically Christian marriages are better than non-Christian marriages. Their satisfaction is higher. They report higher levels of satisfaction. They seem happier. They have more joy. It's because we have a God who's designed this way to do things well. And I want to, for a moment, speak to those of you who are either Christian, but not really practicing all that much, or aren't really Christian. And you're probably sitting here and listening to me, and you see a couple things in here that work well. You're like, yeah, set clear expectations. You're like, that works well. Like, I'm going to do that, and that'll help with my relationship. But, like the whole setting guardrails, like I don't really follow Christ all that much, and I'm not really about like this whole, I'm not fully Christian yet, and so the submitting to God thing is confusing to me. But if there's certain things within the Christian walk that lead to a better marriage and lead to a better dating relationship that are working for us, and you choose to borrow some of those, it's not that you're creating like this perfect mix for yourself of like the things you like from Christianity you're applying and the things you like from the secular world you're applying to make this perfect relationship. It's that the best relationships that we have seen out there, not just from a perspective of the church, but even the world, magazines, statisticians, the best relationships they have seen out there are long-lasting Christian marriages in which two couples submit to God and each other. And if there's a secret that they have figured out, it is this right here, to submit to God. So if you're sitting there and you want to borrow parts of everything here, then you're not lending to what can give you the best relationship. And so that's where I want to challenge you. Start asking those questions. Start figuring out why we use parts of it. Don't just use the parts you like, use all of it, because what you'll find out is you'll have not only a better and more fulfilling life that will lead to a place in eternity, but you also are going to have a happier marriage in which you care more deeply and lovingly about your spouse than any other relationship out there. And 1 Corinthians 10:31 says this, and I think it gives perspective to dating for me, why I think dating is even relevant. It says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of the Lord. Paul is writing to the Corinthian church, and he's correcting parts of their behavior, and he says, look, some of you are eating these things that are fine to eat, but there's other Christians that have a problem with them because of the system that used to be set up. And he told them, even if it's okay to eat, don't eat it because it bothers someone else, and we want them to be able to be the best Christians. And so he makes this statement, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of the Lord. And we can throw dating in there. Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, including dating, do it all for the glory of the Lord. If your dating relationship does not glorify Christ, if your dating relationship does not make you look more like Christ, then there is no point to it. And you should not be dating if it is doing the opposite. The reason that I am confident in my relationship with Heather, the reason that I know that when we get married on June 29th, that I don't even think twice about it or have any second considerations is because I know that she is constantly pushing me and making me look more like Christ, and that's all I could ever ask for a relationship. I'm about to say a statement that's kind of harsh, but if Heather is not making me look more like Christ, and I am not making her look more like Christ, then we should not be together. You're like, but you have so much history and you have all that. But all of that history and all that foundation we have in our relationship is built upon this concept of making each other look more like Christ so that we can glorify him. Because in everything we do, our purpose in dating should be the same as our purpose of life for those of us who claim to be Christian, which is to glorify Christ. And if your dating relationship is not glorifying Christ, then get out of it. Because ultimately, what I am trying to do is look as much like Christ so that when I get up to that kingdom of heaven, I can look my Savior face to face. And when I'm bowing to him, he looks at me in the eyes and says, well done, good and faithful servant. And then he gives me the keys to a castle because I have stewarded well this life he has given me on earth. But some of us are sacrificing wanting to date because it fulfills this little part inside of us so that when we get up to heaven, God still says, well done, good and faithful servant, but we're not stewarding well this life we have, that God says, yeah, you barely made it, but you wasted the first part of your life dating because you wanted a little part of fulfillment when you could be now seeking to glorify God, that other people could know Jesus because of the way that you date well, because they ask questions for how does your relationship work as well as it does, and it points them closer to Christ. And again, that's in continuing in 2 Corinthians 6:14, Paul is continuing this message where he's correcting these people, and he says, do not be yoked together with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wicked have in common, or what fellowship can light have with darkness? And this idea of being yoked together was there was an ox yoke. It was an oxen yoke, and it was this big square thing that had two holes, one for each ox, and then a big plow behind it. And what they would do is they'd clamp in one ox and clamp in the other, and if there was two ox of different strength, one would choke the other in this plowing process. Because one was so much stronger that it would start going, and the other, who was weaker, would start to get dragged behind, and this yoke would literally start to choke this ox. And I think this is a correct word picture for us who find ourselves in a relationship, in an intimate setting with someone who is not of the same mindset, who is not Christian, because we are headed here towards our Christian walk, towards our Savior, and they are headed towards a different direction. And our Christian walk starts to get choked out like an ox who is unequally yoked. And it starts to suffocate our Christian walk if we are not walking with people who not just are equally yoked in the fact that they are Christian, but also are in the same area of life and walk of life as us, that they're as mature as us. Because some people are Christian, but they're not equally yoked with you still yet. In Proverbs 1:7, says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of understanding, the beginning of wisdom. It starts with this fear of the Lord. And if you find yourself dating someone who is not a Christian, who has no fear of the Lord, then you are dating a fool. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's not from me. It's from Proverbs. It's from God. And he's saying, if you want to be someone who finds wisdom in your relationship, who knows when to and when not to, who has a successful relationship, then you should be dating someone who submits to God, who has a fear of the Lord. Because like I started with, education, or for me, wisdom, is the progressive understanding of my own ignorance. It is submitting to God and fearing the Lord that I even understand that I don't have this all figured out. I know that Heather is wise, not because she thinks herself wise, but because she fears the Lord and realizes how little she understands. And I hope that I can constantly say the same. Because in my own pride, when I think I have things figured out and I think I know what I'm doing, that's when I give Heather the worst version of myself. But when I admit that I don't know what I'm doing and I need God's guidance and help to get me through this in order to glorify Him, and that it's His wisdom that I borrow from, not my own that I possess, in order to be a loving future husband to her and a loving fiance in this current stage of life, that only comes out of a fear of the Lord. And the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And if you want to glorify God, then you should seek to date other people of wisdom, people who set up proper guardrails, who set clear expectations, and who understand that they need help in this dating relationship, that they need help to glorify God, they need help to do this dating process well. So I hope that, if nothing else from this message, that you learn to seek someone who fears the Lord and genuinely fears the Lord, and that you are someone, whether it be is a while before you date, that you just, in everything you do, seek to glorify God, because that is the point of our lives here. And the point of this message is so that we can all glorify God, and that's why we live our lives and why we do what we do. So let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to get to be with you, God. And thank you that you long ago provided us with someone of the opposite gender, that we could just enjoy their presence and be with God. The fact that you provided me a woman like Heather who loves and fears you and cares about you, and that I get to be in a marriage with her someday. And thank you just for the opportunity of that. Thank you for the blessings you bestow on us as people in giving us community with other believers and someone that fears you. And may we just be people, God, that constantly are seeking to glorify you in all we do, because our lives have no point if it is not to bring you glory, because you are so worthy of it. We love you and we pray these things in your name. Amen.